launch a revolution in women's fitness clothing. Nicole founded Skirt Sports as a national women's apparel brand offering a full line of products that fit real women's bodies and support their busy running lives. As a triathlete champion, Nicole DeBoom's career culminated in a win at the 2004 Ironman Wisconsin, wearing a prototype of the first ever running skirt that would launch a revolution in women's fitness clothing just a few months later. Nicole founded Skirt Sports in September 2004 with the mission of helping women find inspiration, confidence, and courage through the transformative power of running and fitness. Today, Skirt Sports is a national women's apparel brand offering a full line of products that fit real women's bodies and support their busy running lives. You can find Nicole chatting with customers at Skirt Sports' Boulder flagship store, helping women change their lives through her nonprofit organization, Running Start, interviewing visionaries for her popular podcast, Run This World, which I was on today, that was so much fun, and chasing around her 4-year-old girl Wilder. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks. Okay, what's funny is that bio is clearly sort of old, which shows my messiness because my kid is now 6. Okay, so thank you, I need to update it. I'm going to share with you a story tonight that I have alluded to multiple times over the past many years, but I've never really talked about, okay? So it was about 10 years ago that a friend and I were standing around, and she said to me, Nicole, everything you touch turns to gold. And we were standing actually at the Boulder Res watching about 300 women run a 5K wearing some of the first ever running skirts for that company, Skirt Sports, which I had this massive passion to grow and build because I wanted to help women bring fun and sass and sex appeal into their fitness lives, right? So I'm watching these women run around and all 300 were wearing our skirts and I'm looking at them, I'm like, yeah, everything I touch turns to gold. That's right, it does, right? And my ego wanted to believe that too. And on the surface, it did. It was shiny, it was gold, but it was almost like a little bit of fool's gold because under the surface there were layers, and in those layers there were some cracks. And one of those big cracks was starting to rear its ugly head. And it all had to do with a relationship that I had started about 20 years prior. And I knew that it was coming to a head and I was going to have to deal with it soon, but I kept pushing it down and layering little shiny gold surfaces on top. And that relationship was with alcohol. So I had my first drink when I think I was a freshman in high school. And it was not very memorable. I mean, I guess most of my drinking career was not very memorable. Or I don't remember it. But what I do know is that I didn't like the taste of the alcohol that I used to sneak out of mine and my friends' parents' liquor cabinets. But what I loved was the feeling that I got shortly after drinking some of that alcohol. You see, I was an A++++ person in all ways. I did everything, as Kelly said, all in. I still do. And that means school, A+, across the board. Went to Yale University. I made it into an Ivy League. Sports, A+, across the board. I swam in the Olympic trials when I was 16 years old. Any club I ever joined, I had to be the president. I just did it all, right? I had to be the best. I put it all in. And with the intensity and the dedication that you give to those kinds of efforts, I needed an outlet. I didn't really realize I needed an outlet until I had that first drink of alcohol. Years passed. In high school, the drinking was largely, I'd say, on the weekends, right? Weekend parties in the Midwest is kind of what you did. You could tell from the outside looking in that I wasn't someone who just had one drink. From the beginning, I drank to excess. It's what I did. And I started to create this identity for myself, and it's so screwed up to think about, but I took pride in it. I was like, I'm a drinker, I can drink. I'm a partier, I'm a party girl. So high school, I kind of went somewhat unscathed through this alcohol career of mine. But once I hit college, no holds barred, right? No one's looking over your shoulders. You can make it a 24/7 habit. And at times I did. Yet at the same time, I was still going to an Ivy League school. I ended up graduating, getting a degree, and I was swimming, a collegiate swimmer. But I was still using alcohol as an outlet. It was very important to me. It's funny, I think about why you develop coping mechanisms in your life. I'm not sure why that's the one that stuck for me, but I believe we develop them to help us survive in this crazy world. And I also know that at certain times in our lives, they stop working. A good friend of mine, she's a visionary and an inspirer of many people. She's a psychotherapist. Her name's Diane Israel. Some of you may know her. We were talking recently, and she said, Nicole, those coping mechanisms we develop in our youth, at some point, they stop serving us, and they become unhealthy, and they cross the line. We all have these things, right? They can be drinking. And for some people, it's probably a perfectly awesome, normal thing to use alcohol and have a drink of wine or a beer at night to have a little release and escape some of the pressures in your life. I could never be that person with alcohol. Some people smoke weed. Oh, weed. Sorry, had to. And maybe too much of it now in Colorado. Some people binge eat. Some people use exercise. There's so many things. Sex, there's all kinds of coping mechanisms out there in the world, right? And at some point, when they stop serving you and they cross the line, the trick is to identify that point and hit it head on, and I did not. See, after college, I kind of moved into a more normal life. I met my husband shortly after college and got married when I was 24 years old. And he was such an amazing stabilizing force for me. He was very grounding. He's not a big drinker or partier. And I moved into this life as a professional triathlete. So you would never think that somebody who has such focus and dedication to their body and actually making a living by crossing the line first or making prize money out there on the course could also have a problem with something like drinking. But most of the time I was fine, but I still needed those releases from time to time, and I would take them. And here's the deal. Once I got to college, I started to move into the territory of more dangerous or reckless behavior with drinking. I'm talking about, passing out. Okay, so to me, that's like drinking so much that you fall asleep and no one can wake you up. And it's dangerous, it's not awesome. But more dangerous and incredibly terrifying looking back, and even more terrifying now that I have a 6-year-old daughter that I hope never does this stuff, is blacking out. Blacking out is when you drink to the point where you are, for all practical purposes, walking around functioning like a normal human being, or maybe not normal because you're probably being a moron, which you only know later because you call your friend the next morning and you're like, oh my God, what did I do last night? That's the question, right? Did I get naked? I don't know. Did I throw up all over? Did I fool around with somebody else's boyfriend? Like, that shit happened to me. And I can't tell you how many times, and worse things. And yet, for some reason, I wrote off that behavior as normal, or at least college-level behavior. So here I am, an adult in a marriage, a committed relationship, who would occasionally release that kind of energy and turn to this coping mechanism in this relationship that was always there for me, right? And found myself doing some of those same behaviors. I knew, even after I started Skirt Sports, I hadn't confronted this beast, right? But I knew I needed to. And you know what it took? So for me, falling back into the arms of drinking often happened. I wasn't an everyday drinker. I didn't hide my drinking. I didn't drink in the shower in the morning so I could be buzzed all day. It was when something else in my life wasn't going right, and I felt like I couldn't control it. And a lot of the time, it had to do with my marriage. So 10 years into my marriage, my husband was going through a very difficult time in his career. He had actually made it to the very top of the world, talk about intense, in the sport of triathlon. He had won the Hawaii Ironman twice, not just once, twice. And he was starting to slide down the other side of the bell curve that happens to so many athletes, right? And I'm sitting there watching him. And it had been a few years, and he was in somewhat of a depression. His self-confidence was down, and he wasn't able to give me what I needed in our marriage. So I started to seek love and acceptance and support elsewhere. And when I started this company, my ego was stroked and everything looked shiny. Remember that? I went there, and I pulled away from him. And I finally had the courage one day, after about 10 years of our marriage, to sit down and say, Tim, I think it's time. I am not getting what I want out of this marriage. I'm not happy, and I think we need to separate. And he pulled his shit together and surprised the hell out of me and said, I don't want to. I will promise to work on all those things that are wrong with me right now if you'll stay and give me a chance. And so I did. I stayed and I gave him a chance. But I was mad. And I was like, good, you work on you because you're the one with all the problems, right? Right? Because I'm all shiny and everything turns to gold. But one day he said, Nicole, I think there's something that you should look at and you should work on. And if you'll do this, I think it will help us. And he asked me to stop drinking. And I said, fine, I'll stop. And I'll tell myself I want to be in this marriage. I didn't tell him that I was saying that. But I will tell myself that I want to be in this marriage with the odd chance that maybe one day I'll wake up and I'll actually want to be in this marriage, right? So for about 6 months, I stopped drinking, and it was okay. Like, I was scared, I was terrified. My number one fear was that I would no longer be fun. Okay, does anyone here know me? I'm really fun still, and I almost said the F word before fun, because I just didn't know that that was in me without this special coping tool that I had. So about 6 months after I stopped, and I told myself every morning, yes, I want to be in this marriage because, I'm an athlete and I'm all in and I want to push. And 20 years later, after I was divorced from Tim and moved on in my life, I wanted to be able to say I gave it everything, and I thought that would help me give it everything. But then one day I woke up and I said it, and I realized I actually wanted to be in my marriage. And I said it with a clear head and a clean body. And you know how good that feels? It's amazing. So here's the deal. I was talking to my friend, Scott Strode, who started a company called Phoenix Multisport. They help addicts and people in recovery. And I asked him, when would somebody who has an addiction, when is it a problem? When is it actually like an addiction? When should you try to stop doing it? And he said, well, my definition of that is when you are hurting yourself or you're hurting the people around you with your problem. So what I can say today is that I'm so glad that Tim had the courage to ask me to stop, even though I knew I needed to. I needed somebody to help me do that. I've now been married for 21 years. All in, right? And it doesn't mean we don't have problems. We do, but now I don't lean on that really ugly, nasty coping mechanism that I had to help me get through to the other side, which never actually helped me in the end anyway. Today, when I build things that turn to gold, it's real gold. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nicole. Wow.